Hey, RetconRaider here. Today's video is dedicated to the Raiders, the fine folks who help make these videos possible. With special thanks to Nine Knives, Revenant, Alois, Anerdinwarpaint, Dragon Matrix 7, Exsellsior, Gottlieb, Kazorm, Lima, Nathan Welch Jr., Tomasz Piątkowski, Triphoppenskip, and Valinrook. Thanks for your support, guys. That said, let's get started. And welcome back to Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, as we spend a little time decompressing after our latest misadventure. Which is fine, because it turns out we still have a fair number of folks around camp that we should really talk to before we start advancing the main story. So I thought that's what we'd focus on today. We'll just have a nice leisurely stroll around camp, have a few intriguing conversations, and put a few more building blocks in place. Starting, I think, with this very subtle visitor. What the hell do you want from me? Well, I mean, I'd like to know why you keep sneaking back into my camp. I feel like that's not unreasonable. Hilor nods approvingly. You've earned the title of Commander. Canabris still stands thanks to you. But you'll have to be doubly on your guard. Your Eminence places a target on your back, and there are assassins about. You don't say. Killing a high-ranking crusader would bring a demon far more prestige than killing a common soldier. Not long ago, I stymied a few of the Spinner of Nightmare's attempts on the lives of influential crusaders. So I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Who is the mysterious cloaked figure you were just talking to? She didn't introduce herself, but she was greatly interested in the volunteers that had joined the army. She thought I might know the elf she was looking for from my mercenary contacts, but I couldn't tell you more than that. She never shared his name. I see. Well, thanks, I guess. And fine, go ahead and tell me more about the Spinner of Nightmares. I'm already here, so, regale me with your tale. Ah, yes. I'd been hunting the Spinner of Nightmares for over a year. My agents, by that time I'd created a proper network, reported to me that she'd returned to Nerosian. I immediately suspected that she was planning a great atrocity. By that time I'd learned all too well that the Spinner was master of illusions and charms. That's why I never left the house without this. Hilor takes a monocle from his pocket and puts it on carefully. This is the Eye of Truth. It allows me to see through illusions. My friend got it from the priests of Nethys. However, neither this monocle nor my network of agents were adequate to prevent the attacks. And we were nearly too late. The Spinner of Nightmares decided to strike at the Cruciform Cathedral. They had gathered to celebrate the victory of the First Crusade. It was a great holiday, and there was a lavish ceremony at the cathedral. An influential priest, Anacronian, was in charge of the festivities. They were intending to crown him with a tiara, a symbol of his high status. But the sacred tiara had been replaced. The Spinner had obtained an Incutilis, a sentient and rather ominous cephalopod from the other end of the world. She'd raised it from an elver and trained it carefully. Then she cast an illusion on it so that everyone would see it as a tiara. The moment its shell was placed on Anacronian's head, the cephalopod would release its tentacles and penetrate the priest's skull. Its poison would seep into his brain, and it would seize control over Anacronian's dead body. Fortunately, we were able to stop this madness in time. I spotted the Spinner of Nightmares in the crowd, chased her down, and we ended up crossing swords on the roof of the cathedral. I nearly defeated her, but she fled upon a giant stallion, which was able to run across the air as if it were on the ground. I think the rooftop confrontation was actually in that book we read back in Reader Episode 1. We have a new book about him, too, which we'll touch on in Reader 3. Also, I don't think we saw that story before. I don't think that's the story he told us back in the beta. Though I'd have to go back and double-check that. I was so close to catching her. She'd suffered a setback, but I let her escape. Hilor's bitter and angry smile shows he hasn't made peace with his failure. Good luck. Watch your back. Only trust your closest friends. The enemy is cunning and treacherous. Yeah, well, so am I, so I feel like it all balances out. Thanks, Hilor. Alright, let's go have words with Nurah. Yeah, we're right here. Knight Commander, how can I help? There is much I can do. Just ask. Nurah looks at you with eyes filled with enthusiasm. She's holding a notebook and a traveler's inkwell. Nice to see another half-pint running around. So, tell me about yourself. Oh my, I could tell you so many amazing things, and you chose the most boring one of all. But alright, about myself then. Where are you from? Isgr, a small piece of land that proudly calls itself a country, though it hasn't been independent for a single day in all the centuries it's existed. They have a lot of national pride, but all of it is borrowed, always looking to the great day when they can at last be free from the rule of Cheliax. The Isgari love talking politics. If two of them start bargaining over beets at the market, you can be sure that they'll end up arguing about whether an independent Isgr would be a monarchy or a republic. I've always found it funny to listen to, and a little disgusting. You see, there are a lot of us halflings in the country, but very few are citizens. Most are slaves. I was lucky. I've always been clever, ever since I was little, so they sent me to school instead of making me do the grunt work. They taught me to count and write, and I was sold as a secretary to Lord Exsellsior Tresbot. He's the one I left Isgr with. Never to return, I hope. Yeah, I read about that. How'd you end up here? I was a slave to Lord Exsellsior Tresbot in Isgr, my homeland. Oh, what a man he was. He towered over his fellows like a rock over a garbage heap. A true hero. He bought me as a simple secretary, but he made me learn the history of the world wound. All of it. One volume after another. He hired tutors for me, even sent me to meet prominent historians. He didn't want a simple slave, but a slave with an impeccable education. Lord Tresbot was going on a crusade. He firmly believed that the servants of the good gods were weak, and only a follower of Asmodeus could stand against the demon invasion. He took me along as a secretary, a historian, and most importantly, he entrusted me with recording his glorious story for future generations. In his crusade, Lord Tresbot performed many brave feats, but even he could not stand against the world wound alone. In his final battle with the demons, when my lord realized he was doomed, his final act was to cover my retreat, so that I could tell the world of his great deeds. Some people have said what he did was not heroic, just an arrogant moron puffing himself up one last time. But I say curse their tongues. My difficult journey ended in Mendev, where I found my freedom. There I published Lord Tresbot's biography, and I don't want to boast, but who am I kidding? Of course I do. The book sold in great numbers, and made me rather famous for a time. That's what brought me to the Queen's attention. She invited me to her court. After all, she was curious about my deceased lord, and she was in great need of an expert on the history of the world wound. I hope you'll find me useful as well. Yeah, I think we might be able to find a use for that. There are plenty of folks around camp who might be worth writing about. Like, just as an off-the-cuff example, maybe me? Why not? As soon as we finish off the demons, I'll get right to it. Just take care that you don't end up like Lord Tresbot. Yeah, I wasn't planning to, but thanks. So Cheliax, huh? Do you worship Asmodeus, then? She makes a wry face. When I was a slave in Isgr, they would beat me with a stick to force me into believing in Asmodeus. They hit me and said it was for my own good. Ever since then, I don't like temples. I realize there are different gods, like Desna and Caden, who teach goodness and freedom. But it's just, as soon as I smell frankincense, I see the slave driver's stick. Maybe one day I'll be able to turn to a deity without cringing from a blow for not being reverent enough. But for now, I let others pray for me. Nurah's smile trembles and collapses. Nurah sounds sincere, but you feel she's holding something back. Really now? Thank you, Nurah. I think I've heard enough for now. You're welcome, but you should really ask me about something more interesting. All right, well, if you insist. You've heard about my glowing chest wound, right? I don't suppose you have any thoughts on that? Yes, indeed. I've been told of your affliction. Nurah appears at the center of your chest. Can you will the wound to open? No? That's a shame. Yeah, that's a crying shame. So, what are your thoughts on this thing? Well, it's difficult to say. I know of blades that leave never-healing cuts, of poisons that stop wounds from healing. I've heard of witches' curses that are rewarded with eternal wounds. But wounds that seem to reopen and heal over and over again? Well, you said you've studied the world wound, right? Anything similar out there? Let's think. In 4671, a Mendevian army corporal had all of his bones and cartilage turned to glass. In 4700, a scribe in Canabris had all her skin simply come away like she'd been boiled. And in 4638... Oh, you don't happen to have insects crawling over you? Locusts? No? Rats, perhaps? Too bad. Nurah looks at you with genuine regret. Yeah, too bad. So, do you think this thing's dangerous? It's most likely it is dangerous, but you are under the protection of Iomedae, Commander. She granted you mythic power, as they say. Surely the Inheritor would not leave you to face this alone. Have you, perhaps, noticed that the wound opens at moments when you waver in your faith? Perhaps it is triggered by doubt? Frowning, Nurah looks at you with sincere concern. That is an interesting thought. Not necessarily doubt, but it does trigger when we're confronted by things of celestial or abyssal origin. Savamalek, Monago, both times with the Wardstone, which is, of course, a divine artifact full of angels. Thank you, Nurah. You've certainly given me something to think about. I'm just sorry I couldn't tell you anything useful. I will be sure to study this matter and consult a few of my encyclopedias. Sure. Though, if you're waiting on the Encyclopedia Galerianica, that one might be a while. Alright, now, obviously I would like to ask her about all this stuff, about Old Sarkarus, the World Wound, and of course the past Crusades, but that's really just a big lore dump. A bunch of basic info about the setting we're currently exploring. So rather than doing that now, I'll go ahead and set that aside for the next Reader episode as well, since I imagine it's all pretty basic stuff. But that might actually give us enough to justify our next Reader episode. I'll have to go take a look at everything we've got so far. But we'll worry about that a bit later. For now, we'll just stay more focused on actual quest stuff. Thanks, Nurah. If you have any questions, come back. Will do, Nurah. Will do. Oh, good. And we've got Irabeth right here. How convenient. Commander, allow me to say something. Irabeth looks even more serious than usual. Before you, this wasn't a war. It was agony, drawn out over decades. No one believed in victory anymore. When the demons attacked the city, for some it was a relief. At least the end had come. They laid down their weapons and surrendered without a fight. I felt the same thing, but I somehow got through on stubbornness, and the vague hope that if nobody found Anebia's body, she might by some miracle have survived. And that miracle was you. You returned my beloved to me when I nearly lost all hope of seeing her alive again. Then you went on a suicide mission to the Grey Garrison and won the city back for us. You turned a defeat into a victory. I know it wasn't easy, but you make everything seem so effortless. You do everything just like that, she says with a snap of her fingers. The Queen believes in your powers too. But for me, they're just more proof of what I felt that day when I saw Anevia alive, standing next to you. You're the miracle we've been waiting for. You're the one who will finally put an end to this terrible war. And in spite of everything, deliver us the victory we so desperately need. With you, I'm sure this crusade will achieve what the others could not. No pressure, right? You know, Irabeth, I feel like I'd have a slightly easier time saving the world if we had a little more manpower. I don't suppose you could help us with that? Irabeth frowns. When we began the march on Dresden, we chose speed over numbers. If I order more volunteers to be recruited, they simply won't arrive on time. We could pay mages to deliver the troops to the camp, except I doubt that our army's coffers could afford it. If you can spare 7,500 gold coins, I will see to our reinforcements. Well, gosh, that's almost exactly how much we walked out of that Houndheart camp with. Make it so. Consider it done. Fantastic. Oh, and speaking of our raid on the Grey Garrison, I also found this while I was in there. I don't suppose it looks familiar. Irabeth looks down. This scabbard held the Solemn Hour, my family sword. My father once fought with it, and I took it when I left home to become a paladin. Alas, it was not stolen. I parted with my heirloom willingly, to help someone dear to me. Anevia needed expensive healing, and having no other way to procure the money, I pawned my father's sword. I think he would have understood. I'm sure he would have given up everything to help the family. I hoped to redeem the Solemn Hour eventually, but there was never enough money, and soon the sword disappeared from the pawnshop altogether. I have no idea who took it. Seems like I'll have to part with my father's sword forever. Wait, what's wrong with Anevia? You'll forgive me if I don't go into detail. It is a private matter. Suffice to say, everything is fine now. The treatment was costly, but it was worth it. No, let's lead with the good option here. That'll help offset all those, more questionable choices I keep making. You two really seem to love each other. A delicate blush appears on Irabeth's cheeks. She nods silently. Irabeth lovingly traces the name imprinted in silver on the scabbard's leather. My parents were loyal servants, yet it wasn't enough to earn them a title or a coat of arms. Still, however humble our name might be, it is worth something. I don't know if I'll ever see the Solemn Hour again, but at least I have its scabbard back. Thank you. Happy to help. You know, Irabeth, it occurs to me that, if we're going to be working together for a while, I should probably get to know you a bit better. Mind if I ask some questions? Frowning a little, Irabeth nods. Please, but I must warn you, there are some things I don't have the right to discuss. Okay, well, where are you from? I was born in Canabris. I grew up on a farm just outside it. But my way back home lay at the end of a long and winding road. It took me years of traveling through foreign lands before I came back to where I've always belonged. Oh yeah? And, how'd that all happen? How'd you end up becoming a paladin? A bitter smile appears on the half-orc's face. I don't much like to remember it. Believe it or not, the story of how I became a paladin is also the story of how I failed to become a knight. My parents were crusaders. May their souls stand together in Iomede's celestial army. When I was born, they retired from the war and started preparing me to continue their legacy. But my father was an orc. You'd be pressed to find a calmer, wiser, and more pious servant of the goddess than he. But still, all his life, he was dogged by sideways looks and whispers. When I grew older and it was time for me to serve, I decided, anywhere but Canabris. That was where my father had served loyally, and his only reward had been injustice. Besides, the witch hunters led by the Honorable Prelate Hulrun stalked the city with a heavy hand. Who knows what they would have done to a strange girl with green skin? Instead, I went to... A smirk that looks more like a painful grimace crosses her face. You can laugh if you want, but I was young and foolish. I chose Lastwall, of all places. You can imagine how well I was accepted in a country that's been battling the orcs of Belkzen since its foundation. Yeah, that might not have been the best choice. There were many like me there, but we were all treated as second-class citizens. To the locals, my green skin was worse than leper scabs. Even my brothers in faith kept their distance. I took my vows, and the goddess granted me the powers of a paladin. But even then, not a single order would accept me into their ranks. I spent another 6 months knocking on doors before I realized a simple truth. I serve Iomede, not these people. I don't have to prostrate myself before them. So I left, as a paladin, but not a knight. I know it's tough being a halfling as well. You should be able to fit in almost anywhere. But instead you're overlooked and belittled. And that's not to mention the countries where your brethren are enslaved. Yeah, it's rough all over. Wait, did you say someone's overlooking and or belittling me? I don't suppose you have any names there? So, how did you end up becoming a knight? I left Lastwall and went traveling. The goddess guided me, and my path led me to where atrocities were happening. I often fought in exchange for gold, but never for unworthy aims, of course. I wandered the river kingdoms for a few years, killing monsters and tracking down criminals. Sometimes I thought I was just wasting time, that my true place was in Canabris. But I pushed those thoughts away. I didn't even want to think about going back. But in the end, divine providence had brought me to my senses. It happened in Timon. I was tracking a gang of bandits which my employer suspected was a cover for Razmiran spies. I managed to find their lair, but inside I found something far more dangerous than spies. An unholy temple to Zon Kuthan. When I broke in there, the cultists were about to sacrifice someone. The person who was destined to become my wife, Anevia. But that's another story. After I cut down the cultists, I examined their papers and couldn't believe my eyes. A network of evil cults had spread through all of Avestan, including Mendev. Worse, the documents clearly showed that their allies, the Templars of the Ivory Labyrinth, had infested my native Canabris, and were even among the ranks of the Paladins. After that, delaying my homecoming would be tantamount to desertion. Luckily, I was no longer alone. Anevia was as eager to destroy the cultists as I was. Oops. Anevia and I hurried to Canabris. We couldn't trust anyone. The papers indicated that the cultists had infiltrated everything. Luckily, I had some experience in investigation, and my beloved, the half-orc smiles warmly. She knew her way around working locks, tailing people, and trading information with the city's bottom feeders. Soon we'd defeated, alas not the whole Hydra, but a few of its heads. Do you know who turned out to be the leader of the cultists? The commander of the Eagle Watch. Can you imagine? While Prelate Hulrun was chasing witches through the city, the enemies had infiltrated the very order responsible for internal security. The scandal reached the ears of the Queen. At first she planned to disband the order in disgrace, but then she offered its command to me. and put its salvation in my hands. Of course, there was one small catch. I wasn't a knight. But I was made commander just the same, skipping the usual progression through the ranks. Yeah, she does seem to have a habit of that, doling out leadership positions on a whim. Not that I'm complaining. It certainly seems to have worked out for me. So wait, the Zon-Kuthanites, the cultists, they were working with demon worshippers? That seems odd, right? It should, but Baphomet's minions are masters of deception. They manipulate Zon-Kuthon's butchers as eagerly as Iomede's knights. The cultists from their unholy temple didn't know the true face of their associates in Kenabres. We ourselves learned the truth much later, after getting to the bottom of their nest. So, how'd the promotion work out for you? I can't imagine that went over very well with your peers back in Kenabres. They tolerated it surprisingly well. I shouldn't have been so wary. Crusaders don't tend to be prejudiced as a rule. Really? After all, heroes from all over the world, even from other continents, came here to fight the demons. Apparently, the people were only suspicious of full-blooded orcs. There were already many like me here, and we don't have any problems. Though the locals do have their suspicions. Mendeb is as merciless as Lastwall. They just have a different set of victims. I kept seeing those same sideways looks and scowls, hearing the familiar whispers. But where once they used to whisper behind my back and point at me, now they whisper in my ear and point at someone else. It's so strange to be on the other side of humiliation, to wipe the spit from your face, and suddenly be invited to change position and spit at someone else. You must have figured out by now that I'm talking about tieflings. It's true, there are many of them among the cultists, and few among our crusaders, and our fighters do all they can to drive away those who would be our allies. People shun them, call them a Rilu's spawn, or worse, as if they chose to be born like that. I believe it's quite a feat to rise against the call of one's blood and join the forces of good. Still, most only see them as the enemy. I once saw a knight bleeding to death because he wouldn't let a tiefling priest touch his wound. Alas, I haven't been able to change this in all my time in Kenabres. Gosh, I can't imagine why that might be. What with people like Halrin still in positions of authority. So, tell me about Anevia. We met in Timon as I was wandering aimlessly from one ordeal to another. We returned to Kenabres together to expose the Templars of the Ivory Labyrinth. The day the Queen knighted me was the second happiest day of my life. The first was the day of our wedding. But Anevia isn't just my beloved. She's my staunchest ally. We share every victory and defeat. The best of me is alive, thanks to her. Thank you for saving her back then, the day Kenabres fell. Before her return, the only thing giving me the strength to protect the Defender's heart was the hope that I'd see her again. We are in your debt. No, you're really not. You know, I charged her for that rescue, and she paid in full. Though these days I like to imagine I'd have done that for free. Well, maybe at a discount. Irabeth nods without saying a word. Gotta say, Irabeth, as far as nobles go, you seem like one of the more tolerable ones. If more folks like you were in power, I'd spend a lot less time stabbing. Irabeth's cheeks blush a little. Thank you, Commander. It is an honor to hear that, especially from you. Every noble family begins somewhere. You must have heard the recent stories from the Stolen Lands in the River Kingdoms. Just imagine coming from nowhere and making it all the way to a royal crown in just a few years. Ah, yes, the sordid tale of Copper Branch the Elf, esteemed potionologist and occasionally competent leader. Glad to hear things worked out for him. I did have my doubts. Sometimes I do wonder what would happen if I managed to distinguish myself somehow. But then I push away such unworthy, selfish thoughts, of course. We don't fight for rewards. The fate of the world is at stake. And yet... Irabeth's blush deepens, and she falls silent. Honestly, that just makes me trust you more, Irabeth. When I run into a self-professed altruist in a world like this one, I always have to wonder what their ulterior motive is. Nothing wrong with trying to advance your position in the world. Or fighting for rewards, for that matter. As long as you don't take it too far. Alright, let's go have a quick follow-up chat with Anevia. That feels like a logical progression after Irabeth. Then we've just got one more after that. Okay, I'm not sure where else Anevia might be. She's normally right here. Well, I'll put an asterisk next to her name and we'll just move on to the last person on the list. Liotr Hawkblade. Let's hope he's slightly more reasonable than Halrin was. Commander. A tall man with piercing yellow-green eyes gives you a brief nod. Let me personally congratulate you on your new title, and thank you for your time in advance. I am Liotr Hawkblade, an Inquisitor of the Church of Iomedae, the Bringer of Light. I require your assistance in a certain delicate matter involving one of your companions, young Count Daeran Liotr. An Inquisitor, huh? Not one of Halrin's, are you? Liotr's face freezes for a moment, but he nods. Yes, of course. Yeah, and where were you during the whole Canabras fiasco? I was on the hunt. A very successful one, but as often happens in life, this minor success was the mere harbinger of a larger failure. If I hadn't been so far away from Canabras on the day of the attack, I might have been able to help my comrades, and prevent a number of deaths. Really? Gotta say, preventing deaths didn't really seem like Halrin's style. Any thoughts on that? Liotr is silent for a while. Usually, people reveal such things about themselves only to their confessor, not to some curious stranger. Still, I did ask for your help, and that imposes certain obligations upon me. Let me put it like this. I spent enough years by Prelate Halrin's side to learn how to keep him from going over the line. He was an extraordinary man, the vengeful sword of our goddess in human form. He was fighting in the vanguard, fearlessly taking down demons, exposing the cultist plots all by himself. He had served the Inquisition twice as long as I have, and eventually his own paranoia and monumental sense of responsibility eroded his mind. May Iomedae guard his soul. Yeah. Shame he had to go out that way. Rest in pieces, Halrin. It is not an easy topic for me. I'd prefer not to discuss this again. How about you, Liotr? You're here to ask me a favor, right? But I'd really prefer to know who I'm dealing with first. I am Ulfin by birth, but I have lived in Mendev for most of my life, dedicating myself to the service of the Inheritor. My warrior brethren mostly worship Gorum, but I've never been eager to fight for the sake of battle alone. I was a good fighter in my early youth and could easily best most of my peers, but I didn't enjoy showing off my skills. Victory is bland on its own. Purpose adds flavor to war. I can't say that I've always been a faithful sword of Iomedae. Back in my mercenary days, fate brought me to the borders of Mendev, where I spent quite a long time among the Crusaders. Fighting shoulder to shoulder with my righteous comrades in arms and watching demons commit their atrocities eventually led me to something I had been seeking my whole life. Purpose and faith. That is how I found my calling. Even though it may be hard at times, I've never regretted my decision. Fair enough. So, Liotr, tell me, what brings you to my little, carnage-strewn corner of the Crusade? I ask you to assist the Church of Iomedae in an investigation of the utmost importance. I understand that the leader of the Crusade has plenty of other matters to attend to, but please, allow me to tell you the details. Perhaps it will explain why I am calling upon you. The Inquisitor's open face instantly reveals his feelings. He frowns and looks through you, lost in his thoughts for a moment. I suppose that you have already heard about Count Arende's story? I refer to the tragedy at the Heaven's Edge estate. Yeah, I feel like we've been sufficiently informed of the events of that particular day. So what, you're dusting off cold cases? Going after Daeran now? Yes, I am. I have several reasons to doubt the widely shared account of what exactly happened at the estate, and how it happened. You see, Commander, I was among those sent to examine the estate after the incident. I saw everything with my own eyes, and I still remember it clearly, even though it feels like it happened a lifetime ago. Heaven's Edge was a unique place that still carried the spirit of old Mendev before the World Wound. And yet, on that day, it turned into a labyrinthine house of horrors, like something only seen in our nightmares. Apologies for the digression. I wanted to tell you about my suspicions. Everything about the incident seemed odd. Why was the only person left alive a young boy with a newfound talent for divine magic? Why did nobody send to Canabras for help, even though the agony spanned many hours? We found the demons dead with their heads cut off when we got into the estate. How were they defeated? How did the disease kill even the paladins present at the estate, who are said to be immune to any disease? If the demons have found a way to penetrate the Holy Warrior's defenses, why has this never been repeated since the tragedy at Heaven's Edge? You are the only person who can help me here, Commander, because the only living witness of those events is currently serving in your army. Your army's route will take you very near the site of the tragedy. Heaven's Edge has been abandoned and sealed with potent magic throughout all these years, and only the Count has the power to break the seal. He is unlikely to invite an Inquisitor inside, and in any case, he won't like me sniffing around his family seat. But if you, as his commander, express your wish to visit the estate, he will be obliged to fulfill it, and I will simply follow you as one of your attendants. Okay, that almost sounds reasonable. I mean, Halbrand probably would have just burned the place down or something, hauled Daeran in for questioning. There are 100 ways, 1,000 paths, and myriad loopholes in human lives that the forces of evil can use to their advantage. I am not sure which one of those led the demons to the gates of Heaven's Edge, but I do know it wasn't a simple raid, the kind Crusaders face every day. That incident involved a significantly more powerful entity, and that is why I am asking for your help. We cannot be sure that such a tragedy will not happen again until we uncover the truth. Sure, but you've already been there, right? Why do you think we'd suddenly uncover something new now? I was a young and inexperienced Inquisitor when I first visited Heaven's Edge 10 years ago. My skills have improved significantly since then, and I have paid dearly for that. Liotr makes a vague gesture, pointing at his scars. My arsenal includes many spells and techniques dedicated to gathering information about people and events. Almost all of them require me to be physically present in the place where the event in question happened. That is why I must return to Heaven's Edge. Okay, but, why can't you just do this without me? Why drag me into this? The estate is abandoned and sealed with powerful containment enchantments that only the Count himself can lift. This is not the main reason, however. The main reason is that Count Arende is not officially under investigation by the Inquisition, so I couldn't just break into his house even if I found a way to bypass the spells. This is a serious matter. Liotr frowns. A matter that threatens the reputation of the entire Church of Iomedae, and my own organization in particular. We made more than enough unforgivable mistakes during the Third Crusade, and are still dealing with their consequences. Yeah, I think that's when Ember rolled into town. I hear it wasn't great. Your presence will give my investigation the necessary legitimacy, Commander. But there is more. In addition to getting official permission, I'd also like to bring in an independent third-party investigator to this case. Someone independent, but well-respected. And you fit this role perfectly. Yeah, I am pretty perfect. I respect that you acknowledge that. So, you've questioned Daeran before, right? What did he say then? I did. But the Count insisted he couldn't remember anything about the incident due to severe shock. He saw the demons at the very beginning when they appeared at the celebration to announce the onset of the plague, and mock their victims. He also witnessed the death of his mother, Countess Shayna. That was all he would tell me. Liotr pauses. We had found the young Count sleeping like a log on the floor in one of the rear chambers, having drunk about half the family wine cellar all by himself. There is no reason to disbelieve him on that matter. But you still think Daeran's guilty of something, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be here trying to convince me to go along with this. I deliberately refuse to entertain any theories or suspicions so that it doesn't affect the investigation. There is a saying among my colleagues that suspicion is the mother of prejudice, and prejudice is married to failure. I can only tell you that Count Erende wasn't suffering from demonic possession, the most common malaise in our country at the time. Prelate Halloran himself examined the boy right after the tragedy, and he didn't sense anything awry with him. Sure, why not? You seem slightly more reasonable than Halloran, and I like that you acknowledge my perfection. Plus, I respect that you're willing to break the rules. Liotr bows his head to you with exceptional reverence. Thank you, Commander. Now I ask you to speak to the Count and tell him that you wish to see Heaven's Edge. Please do not inform him of my presence right away. I will join your escort when it's time to travel to the estate. When we get there, I will also require your help during the investigation. You will have to follow me, observing my actions as an independent witness. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask me. I will remain here for a while. No, I think I've heard enough. You piqued my curiosity, Liotr. I'll pursue this long enough to see where it goes, and worst case scenario, what's one more dead Inquisitor? Let's go have a quick chat with Daeran. Looks like this'll bump us right up to a good breakpoint, too. Nice. There you are. Daeran, how are you taking to your new role as, plenty potential something advisor? Daeran winces. You also enjoy poking me with that stick, don't you? Imagine it, me, a crusader. If my dearest cousin hoped to teach me a lesson, she managed it perfectly. An assignment I couldn't avoid without losing face. This idiotic journey leading straight into the demon's maws. I could have been on a pleasure boat right now, with the loveliest songstress in Patax on my arm, and a bottle of the finest Keonan wine to keep us company. Incidentally, I blame you for all of this. Daeran lets out a sigh. Well, actually, I think Cousin Galfrey is to blame for everything that's happened to me, and I suppose some of my misdeeds could be considered my own fault. But I can hardly be expected to take responsibility, can I? Certainly not. Therefore, I shall lay all the blame at your door, and plot my revenge. He gives you an innocent smile. Yes, that does seem like a reasonable course of action. So, any of that mythical spillover still lingering after our smackdown at the Grey Garrison? Looks like it. I genuinely hoped that getting away from you would be the end of it. If your gift truly did come from Iomedae, then giving me a smidgen of that power was a very subtle joke on her part. I had no idea that our divine Lightbringer of Mendev even had a sense of humor. Don't even get me started on my many acts of sacrilege against her. That obscene engraving, the truth about the test of the Starstone, is the tamest one by far. Cool, cool. So, Daeran, I hear we're passing relatively close by to your old childhood home. You know, I wouldn't mind seeing the place that you grew up in. That's not weird, right? Oh, I was just about to mention it myself. I've been thinking, now that I'm in the middle of this whole crusade nonsense, I simply must devise new ways to have fun. With all the recent commotion, my birthday completely slipped my mind. What if I were to celebrate it at Heaven's Edge? It's not far from here, and you'll get to enjoy a banquet in a bona fide haunted house. Daeran seems to have trouble getting the words out, which clearly indicates how rarely he has to ask for anything. Since you are my superior, and I'm your advisor, I am obliged to ask your permission to leave for the festivities. And I want to invite you, too. I'm sure the commander can free up an afternoon while the soldiers are on leave. You know, it completely slipped my mind until you mentioned it, but, yeah, that is where your family died, isn't it? I mean, look, I'm all for partying, but, are you sure this is a good idea? Daeran purses his lips for a moment before replying in a bored drawl. Yes, what of it? Am I supposed to weep and quake with fear for the rest of my life? I've stayed away from the damned place for 10 years, and now I'm going to return there to drink, dance, and be merry without a care in the world. You can keep your squeamish disapproval to yourself. Wow, okay. Well, I was just asking, sorry. But sure, who knows, maybe we'll run into a partygeist or two. Perfect. You'll have a ball. I'll make sure of it. Something strange flickers in Daeran's smile. Daeran, I cannot tell if you're flirting or just being weird, but yeah, I'm into it. All right, buddy, I'll see you around. Now, if you'll pardon me, I'm just going to go have a completely unrelated, coincidental chat with the resident Inquisitor. Commander, do you wish to talk to me? Yeah, I actually just had a chat with Daeran, and he invited me to his estate. Apparently he wants to throw a birthday party. That should work, right? A celebration? That is far from ideal. It will be rather inconvenient for me to conduct the investigation with all the guests around. Thank you nonetheless, Commander. When you decide to go to the estate, I will join you. Cool, I'm sure that won't get any weird looks, showing up at Daeran's party with an Inquisitor on my arm. Daeran will probably find it hilarious. And also infuriating. Alright, folks. Looks like we've checked off just about everything on my checklist today. Except for Anevia, we never did track her down. But I'm sure she'll turn up. We also advanced 4 quests, maybe 5? Nothing of immediate import, but certainly stuff we'd want to get done in Act 2. So, let's hit the pause button for now. You know, we never saw Socio. He was supposed to be standing right near where Daeran was. I'll have to poke around a bit, see if I can figure out where he got off to. I'm used to the NPCs having mostly static position, so it's weird when they start moving around like this. Anyway, we'll hit the pause button for now. I'll do the rounds, get myself situated. And we will pick up here next time, as we take care of Sociel's thing. See you then. Oh, and remember, although I do love playing Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, you can find out more about the game by visiting the official website, the official social media feeds, or the official store pages. And if you'd like to help support the channel, then feel free to push the buttons that do the things, or maybe even check out the Patreon. Links are in the description.
It's time I took part in it!